The story of Lori Daybell, convicted in Idaho of killing her kids, started here. So it may be appropriate that her legal saga ends here as she goes on trial in Phoenix this month for her alleged part in the murder of her ex-husband in 2019.
Daybell, who is already serving a life sentence in Idaho for murdering her two youngest children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and conspiring to kill her fifth husband's previous wife. You're going to have to play along with me here or make a chart. She is charged here with conspiracy to commit murder in the 2019 shooting death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, in Chandler.
And joining us with the latest is reporter Ashely Holden with our TV partners at ABC 15. So, Ashely, for those who weren't living in the Valley at the time, could you please explain how this awful story began here and what's happened in the 6 years since?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for people that haven't been living in the Valley, so many know the name Lori Vallow. Now she goes by Lori Daybell, but it's kind of hard to actually comprehend that this whole twisted and tragic story actually started here in 2019. And that is actually when Charles Vallow, he talked to East Valley Police. He actually reported that he was concerned about his wife at the time. So this is Lori Vallow's fourth husband. And he was concerned. He said that she had already threatened him. Well, a few months after that, Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Now, Alex Cox is no longer alive. He died of apparent natural causes just a little bit after all of this. And we all have to hang on because there's a lot of names involved in all of this. Now, right around this time, I do want to bring up, she's charged in two Arizona cases, conspiring to kill Charles Vallow, but also conspiring to kill Brandon Boudreaux, who is her niece's ex-husband. So she's going to have two separate cases here. And all of this was kind of before and during really when everything happened in Idaho. So there was kind of some overlap here, but all of this played out and started here in Arizona, just as everything started in Idaho. And then what I mentioned happening in 2019, fast forward to 2020, obviously we had Lori Vallow, who was then married to Chad Daybell. Her kids were missing and, of course, unfortunately, tragically found dead. So there's so many names involved in this, so many twists as well, but it all started right here in the Valley.
So does she, what is the story behind, Doomsday Mom? Is she thinking that she's some kind of god destined to play a role in the apocalypse? What is going on with her?
Well, she married Chad Daybell, who is kind of termed like a doomsday author. And throughout this whole process, we've seen different messages, different kind of examples of potentially thinking that people in her life had become what she calls zombies. And talking about the end of the world. And that's something that Charles Vallow actually brought up to East Valley Police when he called them, and he was really trying to get his wife at the time help. And he felt like there was this line of thinking. It's also something that Brandon Boudreaux has brought up as well. So, she had Chad Daybell, who, prosecutors say that she really just wanted to start a new life with him, and he was this doomsday author. So that is kind of how we arrive at that name. Now, I think what is really, really interesting about what is taking place right here in Arizona is that we have Lori Daybell, who is defending herself in this very high-profile case that is taking place.
Yeah, she's acting as her own attorney. Yeah.
Yes, acting as her own attorney. She's wearing civilian clothes. So many people watched what played out in her Idaho case, and she looks very different than what you saw if you watched that virtually or even if you went in person, because there were so many people that did show up for that court case. So now we have her here in civilian clothes. She's acting as her own attorney, and we've already seen some different issues with that, right? When you have an attorney, you have someone who is trained to practice law. We now have Lori Daybell, who is not trained to practice law, and there have been times that she has asked the judge questions, and he said, I can't give you legal advice. Yesterday, as she was helping pick her own jury, she at times seemed to have struggle asking questions of potential jurors. And I think that for anyone, it would be very hard to defend themselves. And so now we have this playing out in this high-profile case.
And real quickly, because we're almost out of time here, Ashely Holden with ABC 15. When is the trial expected to get underway? How long is it expected to last?
So a jury has been sat right now, and that happened in just 2 days. So it moved really relatively quickly. 16 jurors have been selected. Now, that process they thought would take about a week. It has wrapped up in just 2 days. Opening statements will still be Monday, and I believe they have scheduled out 6 weeks for this trial, but we've seen this move a lot quicker than anticipated. So we'll see what happens. And I do want to mention between 2 days, we saw completely different Lori Daybells, one who was fiery, even had some outbursts yesterday. We saw someone who was soft-spoken and thanking potential jurors. So we're going to see what happens next in this case.
Reporter Ashely Holden with our TV partners at ABC 15. Thank you for breaking that down because it is an incredibly convoluted and complicated story.
Sharper Point commentary.
As former Valley resident Lori Daybell, the so-called Doomsday Mom, convicted in Idaho for murdering her children, goes on trial in Phoenix for her alleged role in the murder of her fourth husband, I think many of us are asking ourselves again, what drives people to kill their kids? I would say no matter what their mental state happens to be, either clear-headed or delusional, the answer is almost always ego. The mid-90s story of Susan Smith, the South Carolina mom who claimed her 1- and 3-year-old sons were kidnapped after she was carjacked when she had actually rolled her car into a lake with the boys strapped in, was the first time I really remember contemplating that question. Smith, who was not granted parole last year, the first time she was eligible for it, was convicted to a life sentence in 1995. Smith denied having a motive to murder her babies, but the prosecution believed her motivation to kill was her desire to keep a relationship alive with a local wealthy man who had sent her a letter ending their relationship in which he said he did not want children. So her ego told her she deserved happiness more than her children deserved to live. Now, as we get ready to relive the nuttiness of Lori Vallow Daybell here in the Valley, you might be saying, well, Jim, how can you use her ego to explain that murdering her kids was caused by it? Well, as ABC 15's Ashely Holden told us this morning, as Daybell has mentioned her belief system through the years,
we've seen different messages, different kind of examples of potentially thinking that people in her life had become what she calls zombies, and talking about the end of the world. And that's something that Charles Vallow actually brought up to East Valley Police when he called them, and he was really trying to get his wife at the time help.
Yeah. She believed her kids were zombies. When Charles Vallow filed for divorce, the man that she is on trial for next week for playing a part in his murder, the court paper said Lori believed herself to be a deity tasked with helping to usher in the biblical apocalypse. The two were estranged but still married when Vallow Daybell's brother, Alex Cox, shot and killed Charles Vallow outside his suburban Phoenix home, the reason for next week's trial here in the Valley. How much bigger can your ego be than believing you're a god and that everybody and everyone around you doesn't matter when compared to you? Now, the only good thing about Lori Daybell's ego is that it's telling her she's so deity-like she can represent herself, which means she's putting herself in front of her jury here while looking crazy and guilty as heck. As Ashely Holden told us about during jury selection, she was very back and forth.
Between 2 days, we saw completely different Lori Daybells, one who was fiery, even had some outbursts yesterday. We saw someone who was soft-spoken and thanking potential jurors. So we're going to see what happens next.
People who put their wants in front of the needs of others are ego-driven, whether you're crazy or not. And that's why I always like to remind myself of something I heard in a recovery meeting a long time ago. My ego is not my amigo.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.